one of the images that I use to help describe to people who don't understand why white Christian nationalism is, even though it's a minority, why it seems much bigger than it is. I
Yeah.
describe it like, it's like an animal that has to make itself bigger,
Hmm.
fluff itself up in order to appear bigger than it actually is.
Yeah.
And when it gives that impression, not only does it help to defend its territory, but it gets others to be afraid of it and to get
Yeah.
in line behind it. And it helps to, it's a consolidation of power.
What's so funny being a journalist is that people are constantly like assuming I know what's going on with the
Yeah.
news. And I'm like, God gave me the same brain you all
Yeah.
got. I can only absorb it so fast too.
Yeah.
It is wild. It is
Yeah.
so
And
wild.
that's the world we're in. And so we'll talk about that. And here we all are. We're going to be talking today. I'm going to introduce you properly in a minute here, but we're going to be talking about this article that Leah wrote called Haitian Immigrants Eating Dogs, Trump's Hidden Message. And I really want to look at that for the three of us to chat about as a kind of, there's so many places we could have a point of departure on, and that came out September 16. Am I correct? So like right now?
Yeah, came out on
Okay.
Monday.
So we'll read bits of that. And it's, there are so many ways into all the subjects we can talk about, as in kind of what I was jokingly talking about with Bekah a minute ago. Where are we now? So we'll take that. But let me
Well,
introduce
it
you guys.
dovetails really well with what Becca's written in her book
I know
about the narratives. So I
I
think
did
that's
not
a
know
great
that.
way in.
Yes, but Ernie Gregg, our producer, who knows lots of actual stuff, he made that connection, and he said this will dovetail very well. So all
Yay.
thanks to Ernie for once again coming through with a good project for us. And then he sent me the article and so forth and so on.
Leah, where is the article published?
I will put it into the link for you momentarily. It's on
And we,
Patheos.
yeah, and
Okay.
and Ernie will link to it for everybody watching this, so you don't have to write anything down. It'll all be linked. Ernie's going to put it all up and make everybody able to read it. And while you're doing all that, let me introduce you both properly. And he's just given me a new message here. Okay, he's just linked it. It's in the message section, Bekah, if you want to go down on
I
on
pulled
our
it up so
own.
I'll have it in front of me.
Yes, and I may ask you guys to read bits of it, and Leah, for you to read stuff too, because people get sick of hearing one person read it. In conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and I'm Frank Schaeffer. My guests are Bekah McNeel, who I've had on. Is this our third podcast together?
Yes.
And that's what happens when you write a foreword for someone, so your ego is invested in their book.
I'll take it. I'll take any investment I can get.
It's like partly, it's like, no, I'm in that book too. So of course we're going to promote it many times.
Yes.
Hey, hold it up there, because I desperately looked around here and I've got everything near me in terms of all these books. I'm about to do things with people. And yours is
There you
put it
go.
where people can see it. This is going to hurt. And then read the subtitle.
Following Jesus in a Divided America.
Yeah.
And that's more evangelical sounding than the book is, I believe.
Yes, you're right. And Ernie is using this. My producer, Ernie Gregg, and his husband, Rock, are using this book in their church right now. So just before we went live, Rock came in and said hi to you. And they showed a picture of them holding up a whole stack of books. And that we don't do all the time. And that's not just because I wrote the foreword. That's because you wrote a really good book. But we've already done the thing. And on that. So let me continue with this. This is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. My guest is Bekah McNeel and Reverend Dr. Leah D. Schade. Is that correct? Schade?
Yes.
I'm checking everything because, like I said, I'm in the middle of a day where I started going to a doctor's appointment that didn't exist, and it's been downhill all the way. And I'm hoping I can pull all my shit together now, today, finally. Bekah is a journalist and author of a just released book titled This Is Going to Hurt, Following Jesus in a Divided America, for which I wrote the foreword. Leah is Associate Professor of Preaching and Worship, Lexington Theological Seminary in Lexington, Kentucky, and author of Preaching in the Purple Zone, Ministry in the red blue divide. When did that book come out?
They came out in 2019, but I actually have another book coming out called Preaching and Social Issues, Tools and Tactics for Empowering Your Prophetic Voice, which
And
I will
when's it
put
going to be
into the
out?
chat. It'll be out like sometime before the end of the year.
Okay,
So
good. And Ernie's linking to it, but when it does, then contact Ernie and let's book you at an opportune time to let me read the book and then we can talk intelligently about it. That would be a different subject, but I'd love to do that because that's right up our thing. So, okay, please subscribe right now on YouTube and then to In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer on Apple Podcasts. If you subscribe on YouTube, it really helps us because that makes them take this podcast and my other things more seriously, and that reaches more people. And to my Substack commentary, it has to be said, at frankschaeffer.substack.com. By the way, I just posted a new Substack that you both will be interested in on who Leonard Leo really is, who's the guy behind all the Supreme Court appointments, and as it works with both Heritage on Project 2025, et cetera. And so that's my latest commentary, which we won't talk about right now, but I think after we're done this, you both will be interested in watching that. And Bekah, as a journalist, you should read the piece I'm referencing in that came out in the New York Times today. Lots of stuff I knew, lots of stuff I didn't, but it's actually part of our discussion here, which is kind of who are these people? And one of the ways in is an article that Leah just wrote called Haitian Immigrants Eating Dogs, Trump's Hidden Message. And it begins, if you laughed at Trump's racist claim that Haitian immigrants are, quote, eating dogs, then you missed the message because it wasn't meant for you. Here's what many of us missed. How it started. I'm reading from this piece. Excellent piece, by the way. Thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you.
The first rumors about Haitian immigrants eating pets emerged in early September 2024, according to NewsGuard, a media watchdog that monitors for misinformation online. A resident of Springfield, Ohio, posted in an obscure private Facebook group that someone saw their Haitian neighbors had strung up their missing cat and were carving it up to eat, unquote. This bizarre and baseless claim was picked up by conservative influencers on September 5. Then it was amplified by vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance and spewed from the mouth of Donald Trump at the presidential debate on September 10. Like a virus that jumps species at lightning speed, this vicious, racist lie about Haitian immigrants has now taken over our social discourse and resulted in threats against Haitians in Springfield and across the U.S. By September 13, 2 Springfield public schools were evacuated and 1 closed down due to bomb threats. As I was writing this, and this is Leah saying as I was writing this, not me, I'm just reading it, and why I'm not getting you to read your own piece, I have no idea. So track with me, Leah. Have you got this handy so you can pick up the next bit?
Sure.
As I was writing this, yeah, go ahead, pick it up from there.
Yeah, as I was writing this on Sunday, September 15th, Wittenberg University in Springfield had to cancel all activities because of people threatening to shoot Haitian citizens and set off car bombs. So how can anyone take this seriously? Trump's and Vance's lies about Haitian immigrants are so ridiculous that any reasonable person would react with shock and guffaws upon hearing it. This is what Kamala Harris did when she heard Trump hurl these baseless accusations against immigrants during the debate. The look of surprise and then pity and then laughter was understandable. Indeed, the notion has become a meme, a joke, and a viral cultural witticism that even President Biden shared with a Trump supporter. But while we were laughing and making silly videos poking fun at Trump and Vance for the absurd claims, we were missing the point.
Continue.
Okay, I will continue. What was the point of the hoax? Well, some have pointed out that Trump's words were merely a red herring, a distraction from his disastrous debate performance. There's even a name for this tactic. It's called the dead cat strategy.
Love that.
It's a rhetorical, I know, right? It's a rhetorical tactic intended to distract people from one's failures and problems. When you throw a dead cat on the table, it's the only thing people can talk about. It's outrageous, and that's why it's effective. When all the oxygen in the room is taken up by talking about dead cats, There's not as much attention available for focusing on, say, the dangers of Project 2025. But that's not the only reason for Trump and Vance doubling down on perpetuating the hoax about Haitian immigrants. Whenever Stephen Miller or Vance or Trump and their minions want to rile up the base, they need only stoke fears about foreigners raping or killing children. And now they've added a new twist to the trope. They're eating cats and dogs and geese at the park. And now the Proud Boys, a far-right hate group, have been spotted in Springfield. And there is a flyer which listeners can't see, but it's written in black letter or Frankter font.
Yeah, we're going to link to the article, by the way, and it's just a mirror image of their stormer of the way the Nazis always frame things and all the rest. I mean, it's even the same font, but sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
No. So I don't want to take up all the time, but basically,
I want you to take up all the time. That's why you're here. Take up all the time.
Well, I want to make sure we have time for Bekah to weigh in here because I want to hear her analysis of this from a narrative perspective.
Leah.
Keep going. Okay. This is engrossing. Okay, all right. Bekah's going to weigh in.
Okay. So if we analyze this flyer, we can see it as an artifact that tells us who the real audience was for Trump's and Vance's message about Haitian immigrants. So if you look at the lettering, you can probably recognize it as Nazi font. It's a Nazi typeface. Sure. And it's a visual reference that's intended to create fear and dread among immigrants. But for today's fascists, it's meant to evoke a sense of awe, strength, and power. And if you look at what the content is, they're not just targeting Haitians, they're targeting all quote unquote foreigners. Sure. It means anyone who is not white is under threat. And then you have to look at the way they are describing foreigners. They're calling them filth and beast of the fields. Yeah. And saying that they are third world countries brings third world diseases. So they are calling for mass deportation, which is exactly what was written on signs held up by all the people at the Republican National Convention in July. So they are literally calling for ethnic cleansing and concentration camps. Yeah. On the left side of the flyer are the words, "Arm yourselves as Americans, protect your families, friends, and pets." So all of this is an effective tactic to hook the emotions of people who are easily baited by conspiracy theories. The message is, poor defenseless animals who you love are being eaten by these beasts. Arm yourselves and go shoot them before they abduct your beloved pets and eat them. But here's the real lead up. Here's the real purpose of the flyer. About 2/3 of the way down is a call to join us and stand against forced immigration. Who is the us? Well, it's the Trinity White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. So this is a recruitment flyer. So one aspect of this hoax is to draw disaffected white people into far-right terrorist organizations. Yeah. Because these groups like the KKK and the Proud Boys, people don't realize this, but they're actually competing with each other for new recruits. Yeah. And they're fully intent on serving as Trump's militia if he is reelected. Yeah. So it goes on from there. But all of this was a message to that base. Sure. And giving them red meat. And if it's not the Haitian immigrants today, it'll be another group tomorrow, because now to me, this was a test case. They found that it worked. And who knows what else they'll do next. Any outrageous lie or claim or hoax, it doesn't matter as long as it gets people distracted and fires up the base. And whenever we repeat these racist memes, even in joking, we are carrying their water for them. Yeah. So it's really important that we not perpetuate this in our, joking around with each other. Yeah, absolutely. So Bekah, now that you've gotten the substance of the article read beautifully by Leah for us, why don't you weigh in? Because this is an area you've thought deeply about in your book,
And it really fits well because you're talking very much there about how we receive the quote other. And you also reference everything to do with immigration in terms of the teachings of Christianity, which these people pretend to borrow. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it just seems to me if there's anybody around that I know who's written on this subject, you're the one. So here you are. Let's hear what you think of the article and what Leah's saying, and just this whole news cycle, what we've got here in front of us.
Yeah, this analysis is so helpful. And I think what we are so short on in this country at this moment is context, like
Mm-hmm.
historical context. I
Yeah.
think that when you see, all of us, everyone who was played where did this all come from?
Yeah.
How could this have happened? It's because we have this renewing historical record that seems to reset every 4 years,
Yeah.
you know, maybe every 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we seem to think that no one's been harboring resentment for the past, generations. We really do like to see, and I mean, that works always. Kamala Harris has gotten some mileage out of the coconut tree and
Yeah.
those other contexts, but these the recognizing this rhetoric where we've seen it before, how it
Yeah.
works and how it plays out gives us a lot of um it gives us a lot of strategic opportunity as a
Yeah.
nation to say, okay, how do we not let this get so far down the road?
Mm.
Like, yes, as you point out in your article, the numbers on Christian nationalism are small, and there's people saying that they're even smaller than a lot of, because we haven't figured out, social scientists haven't actually figured out how to measure this. Um,
They're working
recognizing
on it.
they're working on it. Oh yeah, they're around the clock. If we ask this question this way, how do people respond, and what's the correlation between the history
Mm-hmm.
versus the trajectory and all of this stuff? And the the reassuring part, and I think that it's important that we look at data to help us not panic about what we
Mm-hmm.
don't need to be panicking about so that we can
Sure.
pay attention to what we do need to be
Yeah.
paying attention to. So yes, most of the people on your block are probably not hosting KKK gatherings in their basement
Right.
and whatnot. However, the fact that it is here and it is growing means that the opportunity is now to address it.
Yeah, and
And
also the fact that the that we have a one of our major political parties is quite ready to allow their candidates to use this language unchallenged by the other leadership, many of whom
Mhm.
are educated right-wing conservative people who know
right.
full well that, as Leah points out in her article a little later from where she wasn't reading, as we all know, this mirrors the language of the blood libel against the Jews, which was the beginning of every pogrom and then finally the Holocaust. And just worth me saying that the evangelical religious white movement pays lip service to, for instance, Israel and the return of the embassy to Jerusalem and the return of Jesus and how important Jews are to us, et cetera, et cetera. Right under the surface here is the language and the people in these far right groups who are nakedly anti Semitic and have continued that blood libel and now borrow that language to persecute a small Haitian community in a working class town of the very kind that J.D. Vance pretends to be representing and are ready to rip a page from this. And so this is so disgusting on many levels that have nothing to do with whether people are having KKK meetings, which some are, but not many are, as you say, but has everything to do with, is there any line these folks won't cross to put Donald Trump back in the White House?
And I think that's the key, is that in bad faith arguments, the reason I wrote my book the way I did and
Yeah.
looked at the dividing lines that are underneath our political dividing lines
Mm-hmm.
is because a lot of what these bad faith arguments that seem to baffle thinking people,
Yeah.
we're always like, how could you even believe that? And that react Kamala Harris's tactic in laughing at it is to disarm it. It's
Yeah.
like the laughter is actually, to ridicule something is far more powerful than to debunk
Sure.
it or fight
Sure.
it. However, all most people want is an
Mm,
excuse to do what they already wanted to do anyway.
mm,
Mm,
There's not probably a lot of folks who are actively welcoming Haitian immigrants
yeah.
who were suddenly startled and like, well, I better change my mind now that I have the facts about the pets.
Mm,
For the most part, it is people who were already mad that
yeah.
the Haitians were there.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't even think that they're primed. There are people who are primed to believe conspiracy theories, and
Hmm.
I think that's a small segment. And a much larger segment are people who just need a line to
Mm,
throw at you
hmm.
to not have to say, I don't want more Black people in my community.
Hmm.
there it
Sure.
is.
And that's the
Yeah.
real, and because there are still things in the United States that were amazingly enough that you're just not allowed to say, there
Yeah.
are things that are politically not viable. It is not viable for Trump to stand up there and be like, I hate Black people. Or for JD Vance to get up there and be like, I hate women. They can't say
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
But what they can do is say, we're so politically correct, we have to accept that
Hmm.
people are eating cats. And that the truth of it doesn't even matter
Mm.
if you now have the cover
Sure.
to move how you wanted to move anyway.
Yeah, and you can say, well, maybe this is in this instance, but this kind of thing obviously is going on, so you can sort of generalize these are bad people. And then, who would have thought, as Ernie texted me just now, Taylor Swift is the stand-in for all women. So you can say you hate her
Mm-hmm.
and, and the childless cat ladies or whatever. So they're always biting around the edge. I want to bring something up here, two things. One, the polls show that there's actually a large number of Americans who really do want mass deportation, who don't
Mm.
regard themselves as racist. They're sort of defending the country as they see it. When it comes to immigrants in general, what are called illegal immigrants by them in particular. And that has a broad base of support. I'm not saying a majority support, but a lot. And then the other thing is that I want to throw out to both of you as a general topic of discussion here that I think is really important for all these issues. And go back to you on this, Leah, first, and then Bekah, and see where you go with this. Something that's dawning on me very, very clearly out of my own background of evangelical leadership and then leaving and so forth, and the tactics we used in the 70s and the 80s and that are still there is this kind of self-pity of people who feel they have been persecuted when in fact they are in the majority and in charge. And the Supreme Court very much still is using that language now with the Roberts Court of, we're defending a minority here of conservative Roman Catholics and evangelicals and others that when you actually put them together, they control one whole political party. So they're scarcely persecuted. So they're always on the side of, religious liberty when it is versus, say, a gay couple or whatever it may be. And then the other thing is, and this is a big one, I lived in South Africa for a year in the mid 1980s to the late 1980s, just before the apartheid regime began to fall apart. Nelson Mandela was released from prison. And so I've always paid attention to the apartheid regime there because I lived as a white in the apartheid regime of South Africa. And it seems to me that the strategy of Project 2025 and Leonard Leo and these other people and the Supreme Court, the Roberts Court now, and telling Trump he can do anything he wants as long as it's an official action, and always religious liberties interpreted in favor of conservatives and so forth. That if you look at this whole picture, what is actually being put in place, and I do not imply a conspiracy here, although Leonard Leo and Project 2025 come pretty close to conspirators. They're really organizing a non-race-based apartheid system wherein a conservative minority will be able to rule and manage a much more broad spectrum majority, not just racially and ethnically, but in terms of our views, say, take abortion or whatever it may be, or the role of women in life. The culture wars as such, a lot of those battles are moving in the direction of a more libertarian and certainly a more liberal point of view in a lot of areas in terms of actual countable majorities. So to get these things to happen, Leonard Leo, Project 2025, if you really analyze what they're doing, it's the concentration of power in the hands of white men, certain white men, the tech bros, Elon Musk and his buddies, the Supreme Court majority. They have a woman there, okay, but she comes out of that same Roman Catholic background. Amy Coney Barrett and so forth. But I want you both to talk, if you would, and just react to that. Do you think I'm right or wrong? And if so, how does this play out in terms of democracy, the next election, and the fact that this apartheid regime of the minority has worked before? You know, these were called royalties before democracy, where you have an elite and it's always top down. These males mostly are putting themselves in a place to be that elite again and actually fighting the system, whether it's voter registration. Anytime you look at it, it can be different people. It may not even be connected, but they all seem to be doing the same thing. We're coming up with a plan to make sure that the majority of American voters no longer run the country, but we do. How do we get around democracy? How do we get around checks and balance? Okay, load the Supreme Court, load the federal judiciary, give Donald Trump unlimited powers, as long as it's an official action. All these things have one thing in common, and it seems to me it's organizing the new American apartheid.
I love that. I totally agree. And one of the images that I use to help describe to people who don't understand why white Christian nationalism is, even though it's a minority, why it seems much bigger than it is. Yeah. I describe it like, it's like an animal that has to make itself bigger, fluff itself up in order to appear bigger than it actually is. Yeah. And when it gives that impression, not only does it help to defend its territory, but it gets others to be afraid of it and to get in line behind it. And it helps it's a consolidation of power. So I turn to Jonathan Haidt's work in The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Disagree About Religion and Politics. And he talks about the concept of humans being groupish. And this is very much in line with what you talk about, Bekah, in your book with the us versus them. Yeah. Why is that so strong for human beings? Because it's actually a survival tactic. When we can band together against a common enemy, we increase our chances of survival. So that worked in terms of human beings being able to, in terms of evolution, being able to survive. But that has been weaponized many, many times throughout human history in order to oppress those who are deemed to be other and outside. And it is difficult to move from, the lower brain to the prefrontal cortex, which is what I believe Jesus was always trying to get us to do, like move into that critical thinking, breaking things open. That's what he was constantly trying to do. But man, the mid and the lower brain are, they're much older, they're much stronger. Yeah. And it seems like an uphill battle because we always revert to that groupishness, to that fear, and the idea that when we, and I love this in your book, Bekah, that our suffering is what we need to pay attention to, not the suffering of the other, which is completely counter to what Jesus was teaching us, but it is very strong.
And a footnote to what you're saying before Bekah weighs in here. I think a footnote to the new American apartheid that you're talking about, using that lower brain versus the higher brain, or Jesus' teaching versus our evolutionary path, whatever. When you see Trump challenging the election result, and you see the storming of Congress to enforce that, there is exactly the sort of thing that the Afrikaners would totally understand in terms of dominating the Black majority of their country with a racial apartheid. That's Trump's attempt to terrorize us into accepting a form of apartheid where he's lost an election, but he's still going to be in charge. Bekah, you were going to say.
That's a perfect segue to the other thing about the minority and why knowing their actual size is important, but also paying attention to them, not discounting them, is because if 90 cars are driving the right way down the highway
Yeah.
and one car is driving the wrong way down the
Yeah.
highway, it's still very dangerous. A
Yeah.
minority who chooses not to follow the rules,
Yeah.
and that's what Trump,
That's a
that
great
was
metaphor.
the
Yeah. It's a
whole
good
that was the
metaphor.
whole thing of Trump, is that he wrecked the system
Hmm.
because he just said, I'm simply not going to follow these rules. You can't make me.
Yeah.
And the system didn't have a way to expel it.
Yeah.
And so
Right. Right.
we're
Yes.
having to consider what, okay, democracy has had to adjust for bringing in more people, giving suffrage to people who didn't count as people before. And we've tried to, and now we're going to have to figure out, okay, what does democracy do with you when you have people in power who don't play by the rules? And we have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And the we've though had mechanisms of minority rule
Mm.
in place since the beginning. The Electoral College is a
Sure.
Absolutely.
mechanism of minority rule.
Yeah.
In Texas, Texas Monthly did this amazing analysis where they figured out that it's basically 3% of Texans who
Hmm.
decide who's going to be governor because it's decided in the primaries.
Yeah.
Mm.
We're so partisan. Like
Yeah.
there's tons and tons of people who, for one reason or another, will vote Republican. And Texas is such a great picture of that. You would guess by looking at our legislature that we are all rabid.
Hmm.
Our legislature is bonkers. They're
Kentucky's the
threatening to
same
shoot each
way.
other. Yeah, yeah, in
Yep. That's
Kentucky.
where I am. Yep.
Yeah, and you're just going, "Oh gosh, you guys, is it scary to walk down the street?" Well, no, I'm in San Antonio. Like I can't see a Trump yard sign anywhere in my daily commute. Um, but we have this system, and the thing is, when you have gerrymandering, when you have these kind of primaries, when you have unlimited donors, we have democracy is, Frank, you are entirely right, sliding toward um, this very well-maintained minority rule
Yeah.
where in order to get access to the mechanisms, you have to have generational wealth. Well, we know who
Hmm.
lives with we know where all the
Sure.
generational wealth and the capital rests. It is, we are definitely,
Hmm.
democracy is definitely facing its biggest challenge,
Mm.
both in what are we going to how do we keep it without just how do we address these challenges without just scrapping democracy altogether and being
Hmm.
like, never mind, we're declaring a king to get rid of you, Donald
Right.
Trump,
Hmm.
or letting Donald Trump just go ahead and declare himself king.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, Leah, to respond to what you were saying, that the the hunkering down around power,
Mm.
this I can keep you safe. The reason we fall into line behind that the lion with the big mane or the bird with the puffed out chest or whatever, the reason we fall into line behind the person, the fighter, Donald Trump was the evangelicals' pit bull. The
Hmm.
reason they love that and is because, and it's been fed at this long, brilliant tactic of keeping people on a steady diet of all the ways they are threatened, all
Mm.
the ways
Yes.
they're in danger. Here's who the real elite are. Here's who
Mm.
I'm with you, Frank. Whenever I hear a white guy say, well, it's no longer an advantage to be white, you can't, people only want to hear from women
Yeah.
and I'm like, I can't even with that. Like, go look at Forbes, go look at Congress, go
Sure.
like, I don't know how you look at a grant like at applying for a grant that says women and minorities encouraged to apply and think
Yeah.
that's a sign that you are being discriminated against.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just can't. And so, but the more people can play that, you're being pushed out, you're not being listened to. I mean, I grew up in evangelicalism, so we're constantly hearing how Hollywood was
Hmm.
oppressing us. Hall, that was they clearly have all the power. And I I think that that primes the brain to look for somebody to keep them safe, and
Hmm.
it gets you ready. It's like this, there was this long buildup and this just waiting for our strong man.
Yeah, to come in and
And
keep us.
then they
Yeah,
delivered
kind of.
him.
Yeah, I'm gonna, Leah.
Can I just say
Yeah.
I want to get a little geeky here, because you talk about in your book the difference between the mimetic and the thematic.
Hmm.
That you know we in order to create the narratives that serve the supposedly oppressed minority, they will use examples like what you just said, like, well, it just says right here, women and people of color are encouraged to apply. Well, I'm a white male. What does that say to me? Like that
Hmm.
seems to be really clear language. So that seems to be a really strong example of the thematic that you are no longer valued in this country.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That plays right into the narrative. Never mind the fact that, like you just said, even with all of those things in place, when you look at who controls the power and the money and the resources, the majority is
Hmm.
still overwhelmingly white and male. That point is conveniently overlooked.
Sure.
And the other small examples trying to say, let's just even it up, let's get people to the same spot on the starting line,
Or
that is what
this
they're pointing
exists
to.
because of all of that. This is our
Yeah.
feeble attempt to address a bunch of
Yeah.
things that we
Right.
actually don't want to address.
Yeah,
Right.
and the
Exactly.
basic objection that both of you were talking about from the male point of view of these kind of guys, if you really cut to the nub of it, they don't want to live in a fair culture and an even playing field. They're objecting to those opportunities being held out. And of course, when you have Elon Musk threaten Taylor Swift by saying, "I will give you a child," which I'm sorry, can only be interpreted as a threat.
Absolutely.
This is right up there. This is rapist talk, and there's
Yes.
no way to beat around the bush. And when you look at his attitude toward Kamala Harris, and if you look at the intersection between J.D. Vance talks about cat ladies with no children, this goes way past white male privilege.
Hmm.
This is right in the same ballpark. And I don't think I am being hyperbolic here as the case that is unfolding horrifically in this little French town where this horrible pervert has been giving his wife sleeping medicine so that him, his friends, and his buddies, it now turns out to be 80 other men in a rather small community, were raping her. And somehow, the local mayor said, well, it can't have been that serious. No one got killed. And there is a thing out
Wow.
there that has to be addressed.
Mhm.
And men should be addressing this. And it's nothing to do with, well, I love my wife and children and my sisters and my grandchildren, so I'm appalled by this. No, 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 no. If you're only appalled because you have women in your life you like, this is like the South Africans I once knew who said, yeah, but I treat the workers on my farm well.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
workers being the black population. We have to go past that and just say a blank. And I know I'm changing the topic here a little bit, but it's related. The apartheid regime that people like Leonard Leo and Elon Musk and J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are contributing to is not only about keeping these white males in power, it's about pretending the criminality of oppression against women, which is a form of gender apartheid globally, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exist, and they're nothing to do with it. And I'm sorry, they are the American Taliban. The Taliban get to do to women what Elon Musk would like to do if he could get away with it. I will give you a child. Meanwhile, shut up, veil yourself, disappear. This goes past politics into what I think is the next evolutionary step in the human path. And that is, are we going to find a way to not empower females? Are we going to find a way to recognize the common humanity that we share with the female population? You can't have a good society without this. And so when you ever look at anything that measures it, Saudi Arabian productivity, Afghan commerce, whatever, this is not liberal think here. These are basic facts. And that is, if you want a strong economy, the strongest type of economy, you begin to have a fairer society and you begin to muzzle the bigots, whether it's the Roman Catholic Church leaning on Galileo Galilei, don't want his science, let that science loose for a while, and suddenly, I can get good dental care 400 years later because there's a train of effect here. So I think, this election is about a lot of things, but I think one of the things is about, is this a world where Elon Musk can use his billions to feel comfortable saying things that nobody else would say without billions of dollars to protect them, except a local rapist in a subway somewhere where he's got a girl at knife point. And the same thing, when you get to Donald Trump, and I'll grab them by the pussy, to use his own words, and I can get away with it because I'm rich and powerful. This is about a lot more than our election. This is about human evolution and how we as primates treat each other. We've only had the kind of level of cognizance we've got now for 30,000 short eye blink years. We've been writing for 5,000 years or so. Religion is fairly new. In the midst of that, the real big battle is not about race or minorities or politics. It's about how the hell we function biologically when women have to bear this burden of procreation and men squirt seeds everywhere and then say, I will give you a child in 2024, as if we're in prehistory still. And at a certain point, we've got to look at our fellow Americans, I think, at 72 years old, look them in the eye and just say, where the hell do you want to live? I want to live where Lucy can cross the bridge, my granddaughter, and go over to town and not make me want to follow her with a sniper rifle to protect her from the Elon Musk inspired asshole driving by in a car. And that's not politics. That talk about survival. That's just me wanting to pass my genes on in a world in which there's some reproductive order and care. So my gut reaction against the Taliban and Elon Musk and Donald Trump and these other guys doesn't come from the place of being a father and a grandfather. It comes from a desire to see the human race step into a place where I want to live as a human. Mm-hmm. And I really am passionate and furious about this. I really am. I mean, it really gets to me. Sometimes, different things get to different people. I can't read news stories about the Taliban anymore. I can't go into the depth of what's happening in this French court case. I am so, fucking sick of these males, these fake men, the Andrew Tates, all these guys. Really angry. I'm really angry. You want to get to my age and have something have changed on, and here I am, I'm heading into the last years of my life, and these assholes still dominate everything. And I'm really, really pissed off. And I can hardly imagine what it feels like to be a woman in this climate. I'm a male, well, I think that's and I'm furious.
I think that's one of the reasons why the power of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz has been so rejuvenating. I mean, when you watch Tim Walz interact with people, and I mean, he's a guy's guy, but he's not an asshole. He's funny. He's self-deprecating. He's comfortable with his own whiteness and being able to make fun of it. And he's not defensive. And, he's just a normal guy. And he's quick with the lines, and he doesn't take any BS. And, so you've got him. You've got Kamala Harris, who not only calls out the BS. I mean, her debate performance was stellar, absolutely stellar.
Yeah.
But she also exudes this joy.
Yeah.
And I think about the movie Monsters Inc., the first one, where the monsters got their power from making children afraid. Mm-hmm. And that was how they got their power. Well, it wasn't until they discovered that little Boo, 3-year-old Boo, mm-hmm. when she laughed, there was just it just blew the roof off, with the power that was able to generate. Yeah. And I think we're seeing that. And I think that is drawing people to say, oh, wait, so they're both different kinds of power that mm-hmm. we're seeing here. And what is it that the power of fear is actually that's not a power of abundance. It's in short supply. That's why there's competition for it. That's why these, like I said in the article, the hate groups are competing with each other
Yeah.
for recruits, but the power of joy and abundance and generosity, it's regenerative. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think when people get a taste of that, like when I
Mhm.
watched the Democratic National Convention, it was the
Mhm.
first time I think
Mhm.
possibly in my life that I felt proud to be an American, that I
Yeah.
actually felt a
Yeah.
positive form of patriotism. And I was like, what is this that I'm feeling? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. What do you think, Becca?
I I love that. I love the Monsters Inc. thing. And I do look around the world, and I am also, I mean, I get ragey as well when I look at the hubris, and I think of it as like the we had to drown a rat once
Mhm.
in my house, and it really, really fought there at the end. It started thrashing and biting, and my husband had to hold it down. And in this, I mean, I'm not advocating cruelty to animals, but we had to kill the rat, and we had to drown it. And it just fought. I think of this where when movements are on their back foot, you see an uptick in
Mhm.
violence.
Mm,
And
mm,
here's the thing is that, like, yeah, it would be great if all of the structures and things were not stacked against women in ways that they still are, if there were not
Mhm.
cultural things. But you know what? Here we come.
hmm
I get
We're
hopeful
not going back.
Me too.
Yep.
because
Yeah.
I look at it and I go, yeah, I hate the violence, and I hate that there's still places in this world where there it is still the system still doesn't protect women.
Yeah.
But I think we are inevitable.
Mm.
I think that
Mm,
it is
mm,
half the planet.
mm,
Hope
mm.
so.
And
Good word. Speaking of hope, I like that. Hey, Ernie asked me to ask you, Leah, about your work empowering pastors to address these issues and divisions from the pulpit. That sounds so interesting. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, interesting segue. So, one of the things that I think is really important in this conversation that we're having
Yeah.
is that faith leaders model the kind of courageous discourse that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And talks about the parables of Jesus, and you know, and you do a great job of this in your book, Becca, where you point out the kind of subversive way that Jesus does this, that
Hmm.
if we incorporated this into our preaching, I think could be very powerful. And there are people doing this, but there are also factors that are going on in congregations and society that make it difficult for pastors who do want to engage with social issues to do so, either because of their own vulnerability or their congregation's what might be called brittleness,
Yeah.
losing finances, losing people, that sort of thing. And also, if there's a relationship that has a history of conflict, either within the congregation themselves or between the congregation and the
Mm.
pastor. So I developed an assessment tool, which I'll put the link into the chat, and you can share it on the show notes. But it's an assessment tool to help pastors figure out where their vulnerabilities and strengths are, and based on this assessment that it puts out for them, they can
Yeah.
decide whether they want to take a gentle, invitational, or robust approach
Mhm.
to these issues in their preaching and ministry. And
Mm.
then the book gives lots of examples. I give 3 different tactics for each of the strategies. So there's 9 of them in all, so that a pastor can say, oh, I could do this if I want to talk about this, as a way to, be courageous but not lose my job.
Mm.
So it's a way to help equip pastors to wade into these waters, because I've been doing research with pastors and congregations for 7 or 8 years now, surveying questionnaires for thousands of folks. And
Mm.
believe it or not, the majority of congregants want to hear sermons that address social issues. They
Sure, of
want
course.
to know what biblical and theological foundations can help them make sense of this. And they want a place where they can have healthy, constructive conversation about this, where it's not just us versus them, but
Yeah.
it's like, us together, united, grapple with this with our best selves
Hmm.
and living into the model of the beloved community that Jesus gave to us. So that's what the book will be doing when it comes out
Good.
this fall.
I am,
Good. And
I
and we
want
will be promoting it.
Thank
to
you.
just like, I'm so excited about this. I just two big projects of mine just came out that are, I'm like, oh, if only the timing had been better, I would have probably cited that book 1,000 times. I was assigned by Texas Monthly to look at the way different pastors are currently addressing, like, and kind of do an analysis of different sermons and looking at the different tactics they take and what it says. And part of that story was another project I'd been working on with the team at More in Common. They've been looking at the perception gaps about
Yes.
religion and politics and how people
Yes.
over associate how how ubiquitous certain political beliefs are in religion. And two of the findings that speak exactly to what you're saying, one is how high people's
Mm,
trust in their faith leaders are. And
Mm-hmm.
that puts faith leaders in one of the very few positions left that can
mm,
speak to this. And one of the things that they most desired to hear from their pastor, look for guidance on, was how to navigate changing society and different, like, divisive issues. Not
Wow.
what to believe, but how to
mhm,
navigate it. How do we have this? And so
Yes.
you have this data that
mhm,
is
Yes.
showing, and it was across every religion,
mhm,
Muslims,
Wow.
Jews, everybody's saying, I want my pastor to talk about this, not necessarily to endorse someone from the pulpit, not to
mhm,
say
Right. Not talking
Democrats are
about
demons,
partisan.
not
Right.
partisanship and not politics, but social issues. And there's some overlap that gets messy. But what they're really, the divisiveness, Frank, I quoted you the other day in an interview talking about the how chaotic it feels. People, there's a
mhm,
certain amount of disorder right now that is driving anxiety. And if
mhm.
Donald Trump and MAGA, so going back to a time when everybody just knew their place is what feels orderly,
Sure.
then that's appealing.
Mm.
But if there are people who can speak an order, and I believe that we'll find order again
Mm,
when there is, when we recognize the oneness of humanity. I
yeah.
really do
Mm.
believe that until you
Mm.
see Earth as your
Mhm,
team and
mm,
everybody
Yes.
on it and all the plants and animals in it and
yeah.
the system that we're all dependent on, until we can get there,
Mm,
we're going to have competition and struggle, and there's going to
mm,
be this power, this desire to pull power toward myself and,
mm,
prioritize life in here rather than pushing life and stuff out to others.
mm,
I really do think that those are kind of the two directions that order flows. And when
mm, mm.
Mm.
we have this chaotic part in the middle, but it's up to us to, it is orderly
Yeah.
to
Mm.
be one with
Yeah.
humanity and to
Mm.
say, this is my team. It's, I have the Earth
Mm.
flag hanging on my wall downstairs.
Yeah.
It's the only
Yeah. And
flag in
I,
our
I,
house.
I want to say something here, but I'm going to throw some boilerplate in because this is what I do. I'm promoting my podcast here. Please subscribe right now on YouTube and to In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer on Apple Podcasts and to my Substack, It Has to Be Said. And I have a new one that's just gone up about Leonard Leo that you really need to pay attention to. I mean, I think they're all important or I won't do them, but this one really is important. You'll learn some stuff you don't know that I didn't know till I read this wonderful Thomas Edsall piece in the Times. Filled in a lot of blanks at frankschaeffer.substack.com. But I want to introduce not introduce something. I want to react to what you're saying, Becca, but also to you, Leah. And that is that I think that what a lot of males don't understand, wherever their backgrounds are from, or something that's taken me the better part of 72 years to learn. And that is that, and I know this will sound, sermon-esque and like pablum, but I really mean this. Um, when a male goes back in history in the time of our own evolution to the more hunter-gatherer period when our little family groups depended on each other, you couldn't have the level of sexism we have now because you couldn't survive. It was the old women who knew where the stuff was buried, literally, in terms of the tubers and the groundnuts and the rest. The guys had to hunt with poisoned darts and arrows. The women divided the meat up, and then they kept the poison arrows. This is something that you read in The Old Way by Elizabeth Marshall Thomas, living in the Kalahari in the 1950s with the Sand People, the first people from outside who had observed them. And now, unfortunately, they were destroyed by South Africans who came into Namibia. But the lesson her family used, her dad founded Raytheon, was that, feminism is not some modern construct, let alone liberal. It is actually the original way. And that is the only reason we're here is because some little tribe treated all their members as family. So, rape was out and relationships were in. I mean, the basic stuff we think is, quote, tradition, as in related to religion or Catholicism or whatever. It's only later in human history, after we learn to read and write and get fancy and own farms and build factories, and we have these economic strata of the owner and the worker. Before all of that, obviously life was not perfect, but we didn't have these same divisions. So, in a way, we need to go back to go forward to something very basic. And I must say, in my own life, I have found that with my relationship with Jeannie, and we've been together now for 54 years, or with my children, that the time our family works best and has worked best, of the greatest pleasure, the greatest joy, the greatest peace, the greatest sense of take a deep breath, we're okay here, the sort of pushback against mortality, are those times when we function as I know this sounds silly, but as a unit in which gender does not exist, but we speak with one voice as a family. We love each other. My grandson, Jack, after a soccer match, calling out across the field, not caring who hears it, "See you later, Nanan, bye, I love you." This isn't male or female. This is just a family connection that any hunter-gatherer, 30,000 years ago in the Kalahari would have gotten that moment. And the sad thing to me about the hubris of these tech bros and these other guys, I will give you a child, I hate, whoever, Taylor Swift, whatever, this kind of pushback, as if that's the, quote, traditional thing to do. Like that's the real man thing that we've gotten away from because of all these liberal women or whatever that you imagine, equal access to jobs or opportunity, is just so opposite of everything that is as a male I have learned in terms of what makes my life full of joy. And it's the
love that. It's flipping the script. Like,
yeah,
actually, feminism is tradition.
Feminism is the permission for men to be loved and to love. It's as simple as that. We're the lucky beneficiaries of feminism. Now, men who have benefited from this have to fight like hell to push back these trolls, who, by the way, don't represent the past and tradition. They are a modern phenomena compared to the arc of human history. That's the point people don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But trolls, though.
I feel like anyone who has ever loved a man in the last couple of generations and watched him try to heal emotionally knows that we have not well served men.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone looks at JD Vance and thinks, man, that's a happy, healthy guy.
And that's how I want my son to be.
Yeah,
I want him to be him.
I hope you feel like Donald Trump. Forget station, power, wealth, whatever. Like, no one looks at those men and thinks, yeah, that's how I hope my son feels every day.
Yeah.
It's not good for anyone's soul. It's a mistaking. We've mistaken power for happiness or for flourishing. And that really, but when you look at the development of religion in society, and this is not my area of expertise, I've only read enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
A lot of it had to do with developing religion that would support the amassing of resources.
Yeah.
And women are the ones who continue. You got to have women.
Yes.
We're the ones who have the babies,
Yeah.
and you can't. And so you do see amassing women in you know royal houses and so just like the worker is actually producing more. I mean, not to get too Marxist about the whole thing, but like the bodies that are actually doing the work of society and recreating
Yeah.
culture and whatnot are the ones that men have used religion to
Mhm.
dominate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Because
And all I
that's,
was saying is, all I
yeah,
was saying is, and this is doesn't get said enough, so I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat it. The fiction is that somehow what you just said, which is 100,000% true, is a new phenomena that like we've come up with because of
right,
post-feminism. No, I'm sorry. Read about hunter-gatherer culture. It's
right.
the old women who know where the shit is that keeps you alive. They
Hmm.
remember where the water hole is from the last drought. That's why our little group
Right.
is still here. They're the one that pick up the person and help heal the femur. And so, the sign of civilization is when you find a healed femur, it means somebody cared. Who do you think it was? That was a grandmother kneeling next to the, quote, strong warrior who broke his leg. On and on and on. Tradition beckons us to equality, to fairness.
Mm.
Hmm. And
Tradition
I,
beckons us. It's
yeah,
this new post-industrial agriculture shit of landowning, and we've got to put some, our best human traditions are what we have in our back pocket if we'll go. I just want to ask you both, we interviewed a wonderful author, Ruth Whipman, who's got this new book out called Boy Mom, and she's an enlightened, highly educated British woman who now lives in the Los Angeles area, who's got 3 sons. And she basically says exactly what both of you were saying, and that is we're not serving our young men well because we're not giving them the ability to letting them know that, their inheritance is actually also about caring
Mm.
and support, that these aren't feminist attributes. This is what, quote, men do.
hmm,
And I love her book, and giving it a shout out
It's what
here.
humans do. It's what
What humans
humans
do.
do.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm also cognizant of our LGBTQIA plus folks that even the binary of male female can be has been weaponized,
Yeah, of
and
course.
so it's what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to feel things?
Yeah.
And how can we be expansive in that instead of limiting it to this one little slice of what it means to be a man or a
Right.
trad wife or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, and the thing is, where what we need to learn from is that, yeah, to be human, and I mean everybody, um, to be human is by definition, by the most basic human survival definition, to be a human, period, is to be a caregiver.
yes,
That's
Mm.
the only reason we're having this conversation.
Hmm.
yeah,
It has nothing to do with male and female, or gay or straight, or trans or bi, or whatever. To be a human, by definition, is to be a caregiver. That's what makes humans exist. That's why we're here. And the most successful humans were the most caring humans. We're here because various groups of hominins died out because they weren't good caregivers.
right,
The
Mm.
ones that survived all survived on only one basis. It was never the survival of the fittest, as Darwin is misinterpreted
Right.
by Hitler and others. It was always the survival of the friendliest. The
Mm.
cooperator survives. And where gay people and straight people and trans people and males and females can all learn is that biology forced the female to learn to be the caregiver first. Otherwise, nobody gets born.
mm,
And so
Yep.
we look at the female not because gender is the big issue, but because caregiving was forced on the female, who would have volunteered to nearly die with every birth. Nobody said, "Oh, well, I'll join that team."
yeah. I
You know,
also
as
just,
as as the book Eve by Kat Bohannon, she says the great invention of all humankind, and the only reason any of us are here is gynecology. Eventually,
yeah,
helping somebody have a baby without dying, like that's the basic thing right there,
hmm,
and that's the
Wow.
beginning of everything.
yeah,
So, yeah, females are very important, guys, and trans people and gay people. I don't care how you define yourself, but without one group of us having once been forced to be caregivers and then gifted with passionate love for that child, which was evolution's bribe to humanity to survive, you had to feel this was nice, because otherwise, why would you do it ever?
I ask myself
So
every day.
caregiving is our shtick. That's what we do. And if males are smart, gay males or whomever involved, we will learn from what evolution gifted us with, which was the ability to love and to care. It's the only reason anybody ever kept a baby. It's the only reason anybody ever had one who had a choice in the matter. So I just don't get it. I can't stand these people. The Brotherhood makes me throw up, and they're idiots, and they're living small, sad, shrunken, stupid lives. Other than that, Elon Musk is a leader.
Oh, one
Of
other
men.
thing just linked to our survival is just that I have to say is when you do go to that pre-civilization, pre as we know it world,
Sure.
their relationship to we know now that our relationship to the earth, the original, every oppressive dominating regime
Yeah.
dominates the earth first.
Yeah.
Very much tied to our relationship to women.
Yeah.
Earth was seen as,
Ecofeminism. Hello.
yeah, there she goes. There she is. And that when we traded in the reverence and the cooperation and the deification, the seeing God in, I think we're coming back around to it. Richard Orr's bringing us back around. The ecofeminism is bringing us back around to seeing God in the earth that nurtures, supplies, all of that.
Yeah.
When we traded it for Sky God, who was all about power, that's where you start to see earth domination and the domination of women.
Absolutely.
And it's killing us. It's literally just running this thing into the ground. And that's the thing for me is that in the end, whoever's in power when the lights go out, it doesn't matter. So in a sense, restoring that oneness, that understanding of the necessity of the feminine, and meaning that not in the gendered term as much as in the the earth, the body from which life springs. Restoring that to our ways of thinking is essential to survival. There's no other way to it. And so that's, I think it's about recognizing that that's the tradition that predates our tradition. It's also about going, whoever did it first, we've got to start doing it now or we're going to die.
Yes.
Good point to wrap this up on. And I want to make sure, Leah, that you have a chance to add anything you want to that. And then I won't add anything.
I'm just going to add an amen. Amen. You all
go see her and go see her Pathos blog.
And we're going to link to the piece. We're going to link to the blog. We're going to have you back on to talk about your new book. And Bekah, whenever you turn out something new you want discussed, whether it's an article or a book, just tell Ernie, because we'll have you back. And then I'm going to sign off here first, but would you please both stick around for a second and chat with Ernie? Because we always ask a question of all our guests, and that is, could you please think of someone now or get in touch with him later that you think we should be talking to? It can be an author with a new book that we may not know. It may be a person with an article or someone who's not trying to pitch anything, but just has something good to say that you know about. So stick around and talk to Ernie for a minute. But can I thank you both for being here today? Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation. Bekah, it was great to do this with you, and I hope this is the first of many.
Yeah, Leah, I've got my wheels are spinning for all the great things we could do.
Well, we'll get you back to talk about anything you guys want to talk about, and or just put you both on together to have a guest, whatever, so that let's just hope that Kamala Harris wins so that we can go and talk about other stuff for a while. Let's all come back after she's won. But before we'll do that, but seriously, wouldn't we all just love to take a breath and turn the page, please?
Yes. Please, everyone. Please
everyone.
vote. Do not sit this one out.
No. And do what it takes to get other people out, because really, seriously, honestly, I just
Our
want
lives, our world depend on it.
I want
Absolutely.
to wake up one morning not thinking about this. I want a boring, good leader, president who just gets on with her job so I can live a bit of my life without feeling threatened every morning I wake up. I'm not
Please, Lord.
exaggerating that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
With you.
Chaos doesn't do well with people. We don't want chaos. Let's just have a decent leader for a while. Please.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, go Kamala. Talk to you guys. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Frank. Thanks,
Bye.
Becca.
Stick around and talk to
Thanks,
Ernie for a
Leah.
minute. Stick
Yep.
around.
Okay.
Okay.